And now, it's Soccer Talk on CL 650. Now broadcasting from the Barber & Co. studios, here's your host, Tyler Green.
There are a lot of interesting stories unfolding across Canada, and tonight we will discuss many of those. The Canadian women's national team are in their final preparations for the Women's World Cup in Canada, which is edging ever so closely, and it will be a sold-out final for the Women's World Cup. 55,000 people in attendance at BC Place in Vancouver. Meanwhile, the Montreal Impact look to make a little history, and MLS in Minnesota. What does that mean for Canada, and specifically Winnipeg? Good evening and welcome to Soccer Talk here on CL 650 Radio in Vancouver as we broadcast from the Barber & Co. studios. My name is Tyler Green. You can find me on Twitter at TylerGreenFC. The show also available online at CL650.com, and you can podcast it. We are on iTunes. Just search Soccer Talk. Thank you for listening to the program, whether live or on the podcast. And this kickoff is brought to you by KO, Kevin O'Toole, and findaproperty.ca. Kevin's got a couple of fabulous homes in West Van that you might be interested in. There's a duplex that's near Ambleside. He's always got new homes showing up on his website. You can get all the details of what Kevin can do for you, whether you want to buy or sell a home. Check out findaproperty.ca. That's Kevin O'Toole, licensed realtor with Royal LePage Sussex, online at findaproperty.ca. It was a big week for the Canadian men's national team. 2 wins. Yes, you heard me correctly. 2 wins. And 4 goals scored by, get this, 4 different players. Imagine the last time that took place. Well, Whitecaps FC's Russell Tybert, he was a part of the setup, and he commented earlier this week about what he thinks of the 2 wins and how that's going to propel them in the right direction.
Whenever you get a win, you gain confidence, and fortunate for us, we got 2 wins. So I think there's a lot of confidence that we can take from that, and a lot of things that we can use to go forward. It's obviously nice getting on a winning streak before those games, and I think everybody's coming out of that camp on a positive note.
And it does lead us to our Barber poll tonight with the latest results for the Canadian men's national team. Are you more hopeful about what this team might be able to accomplish than you were, say, 6 months ago? The Barber poll is presented by barberandco.ca. Tweet us your thoughts with the hashtag BarberPoll on Twitter at SoccerTalk650, at TylerGreenFC, and of course, you can also send Simon a note at SimonFudge74. We'll get to Simon in just a second. The Barber poll is brought to you, of course, by Barber & Co. Gastown, Yaletown, the Financial District, Cambion 18th, and on the corner of Main and 12th. Find them on Twitter at Barber & Co. or visit barberandco.ca. All right, the Montreal Impact are playing in the CONCACAF Champions League semifinals against Alajuelense. It's on Tuesday. If Montreal wins, or at least gets a result, I've long said that it could be big for this country. Obviously for the Impact, but for Canadian soccer as well. I wrote about it in my 24-hour column earlier this week. The 92 and 93 World Series wins by the Blue Jays inspired a lot of young Canadians across the country to play ball. 10 years later, many of those were playing in the major leagues. Vince Carter inspired players like Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Olynyk to play basketball, and those players now playing in the NBA. So it doesn't need to be a Canadian player that inspires you, but sometimes just a Canadian team and the players on it. And hopefully the Impact might be able to do that, and maybe we'll see 10 years from now somebody saying, hey, Montreal's running the CONCACAF Champions League drove me to keep playing this sport. And we'll talk to Impact goalkeeper Evan Bush about, well, Montreal's performances and how they're doing in this tournament at 10:45 this evening. and if they feel any pressure, because they're playing for Montreal, they're playing for Canada, they're playing for Major League Soccer. Do they feel a little bit of that pressure? And speaking of developing soccer in Canada, Minnesota now has an MLS franchise. They're going to begin play in 2018. Could that inspire some people in Winnipeg and Manitoba to either play or, better yet, get a professional sports soccer team in Winnipeg? We'll talk to Bobby McMahon about that at 10:30 this evening, and we'll also talk some Premier League moving forward with Bobby as well. BC Soccer did the Provincial Cup draw this past weekend. You can find all the details on who got drawn with whom at bcsoccer.net. I was fortunate enough to be involved with the draw. I did the Keith Miller Cup competition. A few teams, I think, hate me now for the draw. A few, I think, like me, but should be a very good tournament throughout. Canadian women's national team member Emily Zur, she was also a part of the draw. And I had the chance to speak with her about Canada's upcoming matches, the preparations for the World Cup that's coming up here, like I said, in just really a couple months from now. And since we were at the BC Provincial Cup draw, I asked her about her experience of playing in that cup competition.
I did. I actually won the provincials one year. I was 13, and as I said tonight, my team name was the Couch and Chatter Champs, and it was because we would just never shut up. But we won provincials, so that was exciting for us then.
Did getting the opportunity to now come and do a draw is kind of nice to give back a little bit?
Yeah, totally. It's cool. I think I was a bit biased towards the island teams, not on purpose, but I drew a lot of them as hosts. But it's so cool because I competed in this tournament, and I have a special place in my heart for every team on the island, and I competed against so many of these clubs growing up. And actually, one of the men's teams, Couch and FC, I train with all the time when I go home. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty close to my heart to be here for sure.
Well, I'm not from the island. I think I drew all of the Vancouver Island teams at home as well. So it must have been something in the air.
Yeah, it wasn't just me. I think they must have rigged it somehow. I'm just kidding.
Moving on to, obviously, the thing that everyone's looking forward to, the World Cup. You guys just came back from the Cyprus Cup. Obviously, you didn't win, and I know that's a little disappointing, but how preparations going and playing all these games?
Yeah, really good. Cyprus Cup was actually a really great tournament for us. I think we grew a lot, both on and off the field in those 2 weeks, and obviously it was disappointing to lose in the final, but I think it just gave us even that much more motivation to just bring it. And we actually have a rematch against England at the end of May in Hamilton, Ontario as our last send-off game before the tournament, so we're really excited about that. And we're just really working super hard. We want to do everything we can to make Canada proud this summer, and we just cannot be more excited for the upcoming months.
It seems like you guys have been able to spend a lot more time together this time around. How much has that helped, or have you guys even annoyed one another a little bit, maybe?
Oh my gosh, that's like such a common question, because we do spend like every waking moment together, and I think most teams probably would get annoyed with each other, but honestly, our connection as a team, and we've always been a tight-knit team, but I think it's closer than ever, and we love each other, we really do. We're like a family, and yeah, of course, like once in a while you get annoyed with each other, but it's funny, like we have breaks between camps and tournaments, and we choose to spend those breaks together, so that just goes to show how much we do love each other and how close we are as a team.
You mentioned the England game coming up in Hamilton. How much are you looking forward to that, and then the tournament actually starting?
Yeah, every time we get a chance to play in Canada is so exciting. We've never played in Hamilton before, but I have a lot of family back east that will be there. So we're so excited, not only for that, but also to have a chance to beat England as well as kind of a send-off game before the tournament.
And being a BC kid, I imagine you want to be here for the final in front of 55,000 people.
Yes, there's nothing I would want more than that. I think that's the thing that we first think about every time we wake up, and the last thing we think about before we go to bed, just imagining ourselves in that final at BC Place. So we just could not be more excited for the summer.
There's Emily Zur. Thanks, Emily, for joining me on the program. You, of course, can see her in action with the Canadian women's national team. Obviously, over the next couple of weeks here with some friendlies, but hopefully at the World Cup coming up in just a couple weeks. Don't forget to join the Soccer Talk Fantasy League presented by Umbro. We'll announce the winner of March's contest next week on the program, and you can check out facebook.com/SoccerTalkVan for the details on the April contest. That's the Soccer Talk Fantasy League presented by Umbro, tailoring football for really ever. Up next, we welcome my co-host, Goal.com writer Simon Fudge, to the program. Simon and I go head-to-head with the starting 11 next.
Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTalk650 and at Tyler Green FC. This is Soccer Talk on CIL 650. We're back. This is Soccer Talk on CIL 650. Now broadcasting from the Barber & Co. studios. Here's your host, Tyler Green.
It is a busy night here on Soccer Talk as we talk a lot about the Canadian soccer programs and some of the positives that are happening. And not just, I'm talking about the Canadian national teams. Not just Canadian players, it's the teams. It's Montreal Impact and Evan Bush, goalkeeper for the Montreal Impact. He's going to join us at 10:45 this evening to talk about the Impact's run in the Champions League. Bobby McMahon, he will join us to talk about the Minnesota MLS team and how that may or may not help and affect soccer in Winnipeg. And is it even possible that a professional team could head there? That's coming up in about 15 minutes' time. But right now, it is starting 11 time, and you can tweet us our thoughts, your thoughts. We already know our thoughts. You can tweet your thoughts on the starting 11 on Twitter at Tyler Green FC, Soccer Talk 650, or my co-host as we welcome Goal.com writer Simon Fudge to the program. His Twitter handle is SimonFudge74, and number 1 on the starting 11. The new NASL season started this weekend. Simon, what are you hoping to see?
Good games, a resurrection of Raul as a goal scorer in this league, and good performances from the Canadian teams, Edmonton and Ottawa.
I forgot about Raul, but I want to see some competitive games, but I definitely want to see the two Canadian teams do well. I want to see them both make the playoffs.
Number 2, NASL Commissioner Bill Peterson said in an interview earlier this week that he hopes to add 2 more franchises in Canada in the near future. In your opinion, what 2 Canadian markets are the best candidates to land an NASL franchise?
Well, I think it's the simple answer is Hamilton and Calgary. I would love to see that little rivalry. There's been talk about Calgary before. I know that the FAF group that owns Edmonton is trying to get Calgary in there because of that rivalry. Hamilton, once again, talked about for such a long time. They've got that stadium in Tim Hortons Field. We're going to find out what it's like for soccer at the Pan Am Games. So those are the 2 ones. And then Ottawa, Hamilton, fairly close rivalries. Obviously, then there's more because I'd love to see Winnipeg. We'll talk to Bobby McMahon about that, Quebec City. But Calgary, Hamilton, the 2 for me.
Yeah, I think Calgary and Hamilton would probably be my 2 teams, although my personal preference would be to see Calgary and Winnipeg, because I do think the infrastructure of the Investors Group field provides an opportunity for pro soccer to go back to Manitoba.
And we do need more fury in Canada with
Absolutely.
the Winnipeg Fury. Number 3, what should we expect from FC Edmonton and the Ottawa Fury in NASL this season?
Consistency, improvement, and playoff-bound teams, hopefully. Ottawa's second season, I think they want to do far better off of their inaugural year. And Edmonton, being touted in some places as being a team to watch out for this year, need to live up to those expectations.
Yeah, better, more complete teams, better performances. Playoff bound is what I really think that we should expect from both these teams, and I'd love to see more Canadian players playing as well.
Number 4, with the latest results for the Canadian men's national team, are you more hopeful about this team might be able to do in the future?
Yeah, I am. It's interesting because I think they've got some good results, granted against a Puerto Rico team that they should beat, but it shows me that, hey, they should be able to go to Dominica and win that game and get to that next round of qualifying, and I think everything like that is going to help. But I think that they're one of those teams that might be able to shock or surprise a few teams here and there, and that would be great to see if we can see that happening.
It's hopeful and encouraging to this point. The game against Puerto Rico was a good tune-up to play Dominica, but you must measure this team when they play a Panama, a Costa Rica, or a Honduras. Those are the teams they have to overcome if they're ever ultimately going to qualify for a World Cup.
But Guatemala is said to be one of the better teams in CONCACAF. What are they ranked 5th? So who knows? Number 5 on the starting 11. How long will it take Norwegian youngster Erik Johansson to become New York City FC's starting goalkeeper after signing for the club this week?
Probably not too long, considering that they liked him in preseason. Ex-Manchester City player, very young age, and their current number one is a real journeyman of a keeper. He'll probably stay in there as long as he's performing well in Josh Saunders, but I see this signing as being one where they've earmarked this guy to be their future number one, and probably very, very soon.
I think if the season goes awry and they are out of the playoffs, he'll get into the games, but I think that Saunders will likely be the guy for the season, and they'll groom Johansson and get him involved and get him, a few games here and there, but get him antiquated with New York, with the system, with the team, and all that, and make it a lot more comfortable for him when he takes over next season.
Number 6, after landing broadcast deals to show MLS games in the UK, Europe, and Brazil, MLS reached a deal to broadcast games in the Middle East and North Africa with Abu Dhabi Sports Channel on Monday. Does this increasing global reach impress you?
It does. It impresses me because it's showing that this game is of interest to people, and there's mad, hungry soccer fans around the world. It's going to generate some more revenue. It's also going to give players an opportunity to say, hey, I want to play in this league because I might get seen in so many different places. So it impresses me, and I like what MLS is doing.
MLS has probably been out there, has been something that people have heard about. It's now going to go from that to something that people will see. And you're right. I think it's going to say to players, listen, I think this is a league I want to play in because I'll get the chance to be seen around the world. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get TV deals in the Far East and in Australasia as well in the very near future.
Number 7 was Octavio Rivero, your MLS Player of the Month for March.
I would say that he was 3 goals in 3 games puts him in that position. I also think he contributed with his play off on the ball as well, and in helping set up plays and things. So compared to other players in the league, I think he impressed enough to earn that honor.
I think he was, and I think the thing, though, that sets him apart was just the 2 massive goals that he scored for the Whitecaps, and I think that took him to that next level to become the Player of the Month.
Number 8 on the starting 11. Following the latest round of...
No, number 8 is... Was Octavio Rivero your Whitecaps Player of the Month? And I'm going to say no. Because as much as I think he was for MLS, I don't think he was for the way. I think that David Osted was. I think that I think they're 2 different things. I think David Osted could have been the Player of the Month, but I have to think that David Osted was just that much bigger in some of those key saves, because without some of those key saves, then Octavio Rivero couldn't take kudos from all of Major League Soccer just yet.
I think Rivero deserved it for this month. I think he made the difference. He scored the goals that got points, that put the Caps in a very solid position in the first month of the season. So for me, he was my Player of the Month, I should say.
Number 9 now on the starting 11. Following the latest round of Euro 2016 qualifying games, which teams improved their chances of being in the finals in France next year, and which teams have really seen their chances worsen?
Well, I would say that a number of the British sides have. I like the look of where Wales are. I think they're in a good spot now. I think Northern Ireland's win over Finland was a huge result. That really was a big result for them. So I really like the look of where they are. And I think certainly there's some other teams that really improved their aspects. I think Portugal, it was good for them to get that win against Serbia. So I think some of the bigger teams are starting to rise up, and I like where they are.
Like you said, Wales, for me, is just one of those teams that really has put forth a good effort. I think England, as much as they were playing a team that they should beat, they now just dominate that group and are like favorites now to win that group. So those 2 for me are huge ones. And then I look at the Netherlands, and it's just, for me, very, very interesting. Maybe more so just interesting in seeing what's going to happen with that group, but I think they might be in trouble.
I agree. I think they're in a lot of trouble, and they're going to have to turn around very quickly. Number 10, it's the Tyne-Weir Derby on Sunday. Can relegation-threatened Sunderland get a much-needed result when they host Northeast rivals Newcastle United at the Stadium of Light?
Yeah, I think they can get You can always You can always get a result when needed, but I think Sunderland has the opportunity to go in and get a much-needed result. And I look at Newcastle, and throughout the season, they've been good, but they've also been bad, and I think maybe Sunderland can try to catch them on a bad day and get the points.
I think they can get the result as well. They've always been pretty good against Newcastle at home, I think even in recent years, and it'll be a great game to watch. It's just so highly charged. It is a very meaningful local derby, and with what it's at stake in terms of Sunderland's status in the EPL, I think they'll show up and they'll play.
And finally, number 11, if Montreal makes it to the CONCACAF Champions League final, what does that do to Vancouver's turn in the tournament this summer?
I think it'll make them turn around and say that, A, they'll feel they'll go into the competition having a chance that they can do well in it, maybe even get very deep into the tournament. They may also look at playing a much stronger set of starting 11 than they initially thought going into the season. And I think for the supporters and everything, it'll be something which they'll make, particularly the home games, very, very special because it is the Champions League. It is different opponents, higher quality opponents, particularly coming from the likes of Mexico. It'll be special occasions.
I agree with all those points. I can't say it any better than that, so I will leave it at that. And speaking of that, the Impact's Evan Bush will join us at 10:45 to talk about that tournament and the second leg in Costa Rica. But Bobby McMahon is coming up next.
Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTalk650 and at Tyler Green FC. This is Soccer Talk on CIL 650. We're back. This is Soccer Talk on CIL 650. Now broadcasting from the Barber & Co. studios. Here's your host, Tyler Green.
Montreal Impact's Evan Bush in 15 minutes here on Soccer Talk, but Bobby McMahon of Forbes.com and Soccer Central in just a minute. But first, the scoreboard presented by Via Tevere Pizzeria Napolitana, 1190 Victoria Drive, serving up true wood-fired Neapolitan pizza in East Vancouver. Simon, what do we got to look forward to?
Well, we want to look forward to a lot of games tomorrow in MLS. San Jose Earthquakes hosting Real Salt Lake. In the CONCACAF Champions League in the week, on Tuesday, Liga Deportiva Alajuelense playing Montreal Impact. And then on Wednesday at the Azteca, Club America hosts Club Sport Herediano. Will be interesting games there. In England tomorrow, the Tyne-Weir Derby, Sunderland against Newcastle United. In Germany, Augsburg versus Schalke. The Coppa Italia final second leg will be Tuesday between Fiorentina and Juventus. Fiorentina leading 2-1 in that. Two games in Spain to watch out for tomorrow. Real Madrid against Granada and Celta Vigo hosting Barcelona. France has Marseille against Paris Saint-Germain. Very important game at the top of the Championnat. And then Holland, AZ Alkmaar host Feyenoord in a top-of-table type of clash in the Eredivisie.
Yeah, and what are the chances that Montreal could get a good result in Costa Rica and advance to the finals in the CONCACAF Champions League? Like I said, we're going to talk to Evan Bush, goalkeeper for the Montreal Impact, in about 15 minutes' time. And our Barber Poll tonight, presented by barberandco.ca, with the latest results for the Canadian men's national team. Are you at least a little more hopeful of what this team might be able to accomplish in the coming year? Get your hair cut, hot shave, beard trim, buzz cut, whatever you need at Barber & Co. online at barberandco.ca. All right, it is time now to talk with Forbes.com writer and analyst on Sportsnet Soccer Central. His name is Bobby McMahon. We've had him on the program before, and we bring him back, and we're going to talk to Bobby about that Minnesota MLS franchise. It may or may not help with Canadian soccer in Winnipeg. Could they get a professional team? Well, we'll talk to Bobby about that. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, guys. Thank you.
Now let's get right into it with the MLS side of things before we turn our attention to the Premier League. But will a team in Minnesota help create some interest and perhaps maybe even some road trips or maybe even some Winnipeg supporters groups for that Minnesota team in Winnipeg and Manitoba?
Well, sorry to date myself here, guys, but it's a reinvention of the old NASL again, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
The case of, I might be mistaken here, but it seems to be me that the two last teams left standing in old NASL were Minnesota and Toronto, I think, weren't they?
Could be. Yeah.
So Minnesota had a good, that was a good franchise back in the 70s and 80s in Minneapolis. It was Minnesota Kicks, And I guess we'll talk about the impact on Winnipeg, but the impact that the Kicks had on local soccer in Minnesota. We used to head down to Thunder Bay every September long weekend for a tournament, and Labor Day weekend. Great, a lot of teams from Winnipeg used to head down there, and quite honestly, late 70s, early 80s, when we drew a Minneapolis team, we knew we were going to win. They just weren't at the show. You fast forward that 10 years, and the impact the Kicks had on the development of the game in Minnesota and Minneapolis was incredible. They started producing some very, very good teams, as good as the good amateur teams in Canada at that time. So I think Minneapolis and Minnesota will take to the new franchise very, very well, and it's a return of the old NASL, but on a much more solid financial footing and with much deeper roots than first time around.
Definitely. And do you think there could be some spin-off in Winnipeg? Bill Peterson, the NASL commissioner, said that they want to expand to Canada and have 2 more teams here in the next few years. Could you see some professional soccer come back to Winnipeg?
It's possible. There's always chatter about it, but it's the same old problems we had when the CSL were here in the 80s and early 90s really haven't changed. It's still a relatively isolated community, and where would the other teams be? It's certainly there'd be a little spark of interest, I think, because of Minnesota. And remember, back to the old NASL days, where people used to take road trips down there to see games. But it still comes down to the economic feasibility of it. And is there anybody out there that's got deep enough pockets and a burning ambition to put some money on the table and bring soccer back? That's the problem. I think you'd also look at the stadium sort of issue. You look at Investors Field, which is home to Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Well, that's a 33,000 seat stadium, so that's massive overkill. Wilkes and Waverley Soccer Complex, which is an amateur facility, would need an awful lot of work put into it, millions of dollars put into it, and there's no guarantee that they would actually get planning permission around that. So you're back to the old options we had in the 80s, which is the old University of Manitoba Stadium, which is even worse repair than it was in the 80s. And to be honest, that's about it. So you've still got these same problems, and number one issue is getting somebody with deep pockets.
Is there at least maybe fan interest then that could generate that?
Generate the dollars?
Well, just I guess generate the possibility that somebody might look at it even more closely than they would have normally.
Honestly, guys, I'd love to say yes, but I continue to be skeptical about that. I know that there's every soccer community has its idiosyncrasies, but and I haven't actually been I'm a few years away from real active involvement in the local soccer community here, but certainly back when I was, the problem as it was then, and I think it probably still is now, is it's a very divided community. Everybody has great ideas, but actually bringing them to the table and getting them to agree on something and getting them to actually push in one direction, that's the most difficult thing in the world, and it's something that's very rarely happened here.
We're speaking with Forbes.com writer Bobby McMahon. Is also an analyst on Soccer Central and Sportsnet here on CL 650 Radio in Vancouver. You can podcast the show on iTunes. Just search Soccer Talk. My name's Tyler Green. Alongside me is my co-host Simon Fudge as we switch gears.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm just interested in knowing your thoughts of Manchester City's chances of catching Chelsea. 6 points behind, having played an extra game. Is the title race over even at this stage?
Well, I remember reading a few articles round about the new year when City signed Bonnie from Swansea. And I think in retrospect it was people trying to make a race out of something that might not be a race. And suggesting that the signing of Bonnie was going to be a key factor in the race, and how there was a really good chance City were going to catch Chelsea. Chelsea are still catchable, just don't think they're going to get caught though. At that first half of the season, I think the story of the 2014-2015 season, when it's finally written, will be one of Chelsea winning that, really winning the league in the first half of the season when they had some very, very difficult away games and they negotiated them quite well. And you look at their fixture list in that second half of the season, but clearly they had the best fixture list of any of the top teams. And although they seem to be in a position where questions about Mourinho lack of rotation in his squad and perhaps some of the key players getting tired, at the end of the day, just think that Chelsea are going to have more than enough to win the league. And the other reality is Manchester City aren't playing particularly well since the new year either.
Who do you see as your top four by the end of the season? Oh,
goodness. That one is gone. That one, I think, is... At the beginning of the season, my pick was Chelsea to win the league, I think. And I may have misremembered this, but I will go back. At the end of the season, I always reprint my predictions from the beginning of the season, so I put my hand up and admit to my failures. But I had Chelsea, I think, winning the league by about 8 points this year. And then I had Arsenal. I had actually Arsenal second, Manchester City third, Manchester United fourth, and I think Liverpool fifth, maybe Spurs sixth. I could actually see that happening again, or something very close to it. I tend to think that Arsenal may run out a little bit of steam in terms of chasing Manchester City, but they're not playing particularly well. But I think they're playing well enough to make that top four once more. And Manchester, the real interesting one, I think, is Manchester United, in terms of the form that they've kind of run into in terms of the victory over Tottenham, and Liverpool kind of set them up very, very nicely. And when you look at the Manchester United schedule for the remainder of the season before that Tottenham result, you looked at it and said, well, Manchester United have really got a big job in front of them here. It might be a case of they've just kind of found a little bit of form at the right time against the teams that they need to find form against. United have still got Arsenal to come up there as well. I think they've still got to go to Chelsea as well. They've got to play City as well. Now, it's still a very, very hard run-in, but if they can win these games head-to-head, they've put themselves in a pretty good position to actually make that top four.
Tomorrow is probably a pivotal day in the relegation battle. Burnley hosting Spurs, but in the Tyne-Wear derby between Sunderland and Newcastle. Your thoughts on the bottom end of the table?
Oh, well, Newcastle have done what Newcastle have done a few times, which is get out the gates pretty well, get themselves in a decent position, and then season kind of ends about 3 months before it's supposed to, as they kind of wither. Sunderland will advocate, we all talk about the new manager bounce. Some people say there's such a thing, some people say there's not. But this is a result that there's a game that obviously Sunderland, every game for Sunderland is a massive, massive game in terms of the outcome at the end of the season. But I could see Sunderland winning this one again. They've been a bit of a thorn in Newcastle's side the last couple of times, and I think Newcastle are more just playing out the streak a little bit just now. It's very difficult for John Carver to get anything extra out of them. So I think it was always a bloodthirsty game, the Sunderland Newcastle one. It's one that was played with great endeavour, but I could see Sunderland getting the better of that one.
Bobby McMahon is joining us on Soccer Talk on CL 650. My name is Simon Fudge, and our host is Tyler Green.
Bobby, you look at Southampton and sort of the fact that they started the year, they had such a great season last year, and then they go and sell some players off, and everyone thinks, okay, they're going to drop down, but up near the top again. Do they have the momentum to kind of stay close to the place in Europe and maybe get a chance at playing in Europe?
Yeah, I think they kind of do. As they begin to drift down the table there, just during January and February, I think there was and not an unrealistic sort of expectation that, well, they've shot their bolt, they've done, we've seen the best of Southampton, now they'll kind of drift back to 10th, 11th, almost like kind of what West Ham have done the last few weeks. But when you looked at Southampton's run-in, they were another team that actually didn't have such a bad run-in compared to the teams around them. And if they can find their second win, I think the downfall of the thing that Southampton have had real problems with is they've dropped stupid points against teams that they were winning in the first half of the season. But I think they can hang in there. They can still be battling for certainly a Europa League spot. I just don't think they've got enough enough in the tank to push for a Champions League spot. But Europa League is still a very, very strong possibility, depending on how the FA Cup turns out as well. But I think the overall lesson for everybody on this one is this is what smart football people manage to achieve, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the reality is that most clubs, when bigger clubs come calling, are selling clubs. So why don't you just accept that reality and make sure that you're ready to replace them with at least comparable players and make a profit? And that's what Southampton did. And I think boardrooms throughout England probably sat up a little bit and have taken notice of this. And it'll be interesting to see how many other teams. A lot of these teams have talked about being able to adapt to this kind of system. Where, you know, if in Europe, I think Porto are the absolute masters of that situation of buying players who are undervalued or need to get some exposure in Europe and then selling them on for a massive profit. Now, of course, in Porto, you've got that kind of third-party ownership and a whole bunch of other dynamics to it as well. But if Southampton can turn over as many players as they did last summer and turn the transfer market into a profit centre and still finish in the top 8, there's got to be lessons there for other clubs.
Bobby, we've run out of time, but thanks for joining us on the program, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks very much, guys.
There's Bobby McMahon joining us here on Soccer Talk as we broadcast from the Barber & Co. studios, talking Minnesota and really the sort of outcome of what that might lead to in Winnipeg. And, of course, Premier League, as we always talk to Bobby about the Premier League. All right, the Montreal Impact are looking to make a little history on Tuesday as they look to advance to the CONCACAF Finals. And Impact goalkeeper Evan Bush talks about Montreal's performance in the tournament when he joins us next.
Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTalk650 and at Tyler Green FC. This is Soccer Talk on CIL 650. We're back. This is Soccer Talk on CIL 650. Now broadcasting from the Barber & Co. studios. Here's your host, Tyler Green.
It is time for the final cut, brought to you by Barber & Co. on Twitter at Barber & Co. 5 full-service barbershops for your big haircut, hot shave, buzz cut, fade, and beard trim. Get the ultimate barbershop experience. 5 locations to serve you in Gastown, Yaletown, the Financial District, Cambie and 18th, and the new spot on the corner of Main and 12th. That's barberandco.ca. And for the final cut today, we head to Montreal to speak with the Impact goalkeeper Evan Bush. Evan, thanks for joining us here on the program.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Now, what is it exactly about Montreal and CONCACAF? Obviously, you struggled a bit in Major League Soccer last season, but advanced in Champions League, now getting a chance to make the final. Is there just something a little bit different about CONCACAF that you've been able to do so well in?
You know, I think whenever you have these two-legged knockout rounds or the group stage rounds where, you know, every game matters, it kind of heightens everyone's alertness, everyone's awareness of what's going on in the situation. And, you know, I think that we've been able to handle that pretty well. I think if you add in the fact that we have a pretty diverse group of guys from all over the world, really, that have played in similar tournaments, whether it be Europe or South America, you know, I think that those experiences for those guys have helped to, you know, translate into our group, and for the guys that haven't played in those games before, I think it's been a big benefit to the younger guys and the guys that may have not, you know, advanced in tournaments like this before. So I think that we have a good mindset, and obviously last year with the way that things went in the league, we put a lot of our emphasis onto the Champions League at the end of the year, and kind of springboarded us into this season where, you know, we had a great first round against Pachuca, a great first leg against the team that we're playing now in Costa Rica. And then, you know, also we've played 3 league games. Mm-hmm. We haven't won a game. We've drawn twice and lost once. But I think there's still a lot of positives to come from that. And I think that's all a byproduct of, you know, the way that we've prepared for Champions League, knowing that, you know, every game, every minute matters. So I think we're a much better team than we were last year, especially at this time of the year. You know, hopefully we can keep that momentum going.
Montreal Impact goalkeeper Evan Bush joining us here on Soccer Talk. My name's Tyler Green. Alongside me, Simon Fudge.
Evan, what do you feel you're going to need to do in the second leg with the 2-0 advantage that you've got?
it's going to be a lot different, the game. When they came up here, I think that they were a little bit in awe, maybe, of, the stadium they were playing in, the atmosphere that they were playing in. It was the first game against us, obviously. They played D.C. the previous round, so they were familiar with MLS opponents to a degree, but the way we play and the way D.C. play are a bit different. So, having the first leg in Montreal was a benefit for us, and the fact that we got up to a 2-0 lead, and now we can kind of figure out how we want to approach the game. But, like I said, going down there for the second leg is going to be a lot different. They're going to have a lot of confidence. They're going to come out flying. They know that they need to score goals, whether that be 2, 3, 4 goals. The game will dictate that. But for them, it's going to be a completely different opponent that we're playing, not personnel-wise, but confidence-wise and mentality-wise.
Not only are you obviously playing for Montreal, but do you also have a feeling in this situation that you're also sort of flying the flag high for Major League Soccer and for Canadian soccer as well?
Yeah, of course. You don't necessarily think about it as representing Canada, because so many MLS teams are rooting for you, but the fact of the matter is we qualified as a Canadian champion, so we're representing Canada more than we're representing MLS at this point. So it's nice to have all the support from all the other teams. Our biggest rival is Toronto, and after we knocked out Pachuca, they were giving us congratulations and well wishes on Twitter and social media and stuff like that. So it's cool to see that, the different teams around the league kind of come together for a common purpose and a common goal, and hopefully we can be that first MLS team to take it all the way.
Evan, I've long said, you look at teams in baseball, for example, Toronto Blue Jays won the World Series in 92, 93, and 10 years later, all these Canadian Major League Baseball players were popping up and directly saying that it was because the Blue Jays had won that got them inspired. Do you kind of think that you guys might be able to do the same thing for Canadian soccer?
I think so, especially, in this neck of the woods. I know that there's a lot of differences in the way that, things happen in Montreal and Quebec as opposed to a lot of the other areas in Canada. But, speaking just for this part of the country, everyone who saw that game where we scored in the last minute against Pachuca, I haven't heard anybody say that wasn't one of the most exciting and, memorable sporting events that they've been to. And, I remember vividly when I was growing up some of the great games that I went to as a Cleveland sports fan. I remember, Kenny Lofton, my favorite Indian, robbing a home run at a game I was at when I was probably 8, 9 years old. I remember Cleveland Browns games, basketball games with the Cavs. So all these things, like you said, they inspire young guys, and hopefully we've inspired some of these kids to play soccer and kind of get away from hockey in this part of the country, and hopefully that we'll see the payout for that in the years to come. Impact
goalkeeper Evan Bush joining us here on Soccer Talk on CL 650. Evan, you've had the opportunity to now play in a bunch of different places in the CONCACAF region. Costa Rica, are you looking forward to that? And do you have any crazy stories from any of the trips that you've made so far?
Well, it's been interesting. We've gone to Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, and now we're heading to Costa Rica. And the interesting part is that in Guatemala and El Salvador, the teams we played, their home stadiums didn't fit the regulations for hosting a CONCACAF game. So we actually didn't play in their home stadiums. We played about 2 hours away from where they were located each time. So the crowds were, they weren't big. They weren't as intense as they would be at their natural home field. Each team had some fans make the trip for sure, but it wasn't like a sold-out 20,000-seat stadium. And even when we were in Pachuca, I was expecting a pretty hostile crowd, but it was pretty docile, to be honest, and it was probably only half full. I'm not sure if they just expected that, they were going to advance and then take in the semifinal and final if they were the fans. But, going down to Costa Rica, I know it's going to be a lot different. I watched the D.C. game in their quarterfinal, and, those fans down there are very intense. Mm-hmm. I've talked to some of the guys on D.C., said it was one of the craziest atmospheres and environments that they've ever played in. So I'm expecting an interesting atmosphere, but at the same time, you can either get shut down by something like that, or you can, get more out of yourself. And I feel like I've always been a player that's in environments like that. It kind of picks me up and makes me elevate my game a little bit because, you get excited to play in those situations.
Well, Evan, thanks so much for joining us here on Soccer Talk. Good luck on Tuesday, and hopefully we'll get to see you guys in the finals.
All right, thanks a lot, guys, for having me.
No problem. Evan Bush, goalkeeper for the Montreal Impact, joining us here on Soccer Talk. And Simon, like I said to Evan, I think a lot of people in Canada, especially soccer fans, I think are taking note. And as much as you might like to be a supporter of the Whitecaps or Toronto FC for the good, I think, of Canadian soccer in general, it would be great to see them in the final and hopefully in the end win the whole thing.
Yeah, I hope so. And there's a lot to be happy about all around. The competition itself, I think, is going to get the profile raised now because especially if we have two non-Mexican teams in the final, it'll be huge.
And leading up, I think this with Vancouver playing in Champions League this year, Montreal doing well is just going to add to the excitement there as well.
Particularly if a team like Vancouver, as every other non-Mexican side, looks at it and says, while those two non-Mexican teams made the final, maybe we can go and win it as well. So that makes everyone get interested in it. It's actually really fantastic.
For the crew here at Soccer Talk, my co-host Simon Fudge, you can find him at goal.com and on Twitter at Simon Fudge. Our producer this week was Dangerous Dwayne Bishop. A special thank you, as always, to Thomas Rage and Fred Anco. My name's Tyler Green. You can read me in 24 Hours Vancouver on Wednesday. You can find me on Twitter at TylerGreenFC. Thank you for listening to the program. You could download the podcast at CL650.com and search and subscribe on iTunes under Soccer Talk. We return, Soccer Talk that is, next Saturday at 10.
Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTalk650 and at Tyler Green FC. This is Soccer Talk on CL650.